So thank you so much for having me here. This is a really cool opportunity, which is why I was so excited when Ann asked about it. And it's exciting for me because one of my very first talks, I've been sharing my story now for about 7 years, and one of the very first times I did that to a group was at SLU's I think it was their very first med launch kind of meeting. And I was asked to start because I was just brought into SLU to kind of lead this startup institute for trauma survivors. So I talked, and we were new. We had no programs, we had no protocols, we had just a little seed funding and a vision and a mission, and we went from there. So it's cool to come back kind of real full circle now and even update the progress that we've made in that whole field of getting this institute up and running. So I mentioned our mission, and it's right here on the slide. And I think this, supporting individuals on their journey from surviving to thriving. And that's my story. That's the story that, if you follow me, I was literally fighting for my life and surviving, and am now living this thriving life helping others. But it also describes the work that we do now in our work to help not just trauma survivors, but everybody, because in a sense, we all survive our own traumas, on a daily basis. Raise your hand if you survived the worst thing that ever happened to you. So it's we all go through something maybe really big, like a major motorcycle accident, or something still big, in the grand scheme of things, still big, like losing a job, or even just having a rough day, twisting your ankle. All this stuff is traumatic. It affects your life, and it's at least in my opinion, the reason I survived what happened to me was to try to help lead this charge and change healthcare and change the conversation, around the country, around the world, as far as you want to go about, we all experience trauma, and if we come together and support each other as we're going through this journey, we're going to come out on that far end thriving. So, again, my name is Andrew Oberle. I'm the executive director of the Oberle Institute at St. Louis University. I'm housed in the School of Medicine, specifically in the Department of Surgery, and even more specifically in the Trauma Surgery Division. That's kind of where they found a home for me there. And it's fitting because that's where we get our most injured patients. So this was me just over 10 years ago. And this is me laying in an intensive care unit in South Africa, in a hospital in Johannesburg. Fighting for my life, machines keeping me alive, my family sitting just off screen, wondering if they're going to take their son home alive. And this was me just 3 years later. Oop. Let's see if it'll actually let me do this here. So, really from deathbed to, at least for a St. Louis kid, top of the world. I've been going to Busch Stadium, since I was a little kid, and getting to step out there on the rubber with my prosthetic toe and throw up my no-finger fastball, I called it, was just a dream come true. But how I got there and how I got here today, it's kind of a long story, and it's wound up now at this beautiful logo here that you see all around here right now, but the Oberle Institute at St. Louis University, and I was just asked by a couple people this morning actually if this was at SLU before I got there, and it would have been a great coincidence if it was, but when I came into SLU, it was something we developed, and the name came from my story, and I'll share a little bit about how that all formed in a minute. But this is our home at St. Louis University, and it's the base of the work that we do. But it all started really when I was 6 years old. And that's what I love about a lot of these startup stories, is they a lot of times start from, a little kid's dream, or, a young person's aspiration to make difference in the world. My plan was to make difference in the world, but not really not for humans, more for these beautiful guys here. I learned about Jane Goodall when I was in second grade and fell in love with chimpanzees and wanted to spend the rest of my life working with them, and picking up their, I always joke around, I planned on picking up chimp poop the rest of my life, and I was totally happy with that. And it took me all the way through grade school, visiting the zoo, getting into high school, volunteering at the zoo here in St. Louis, going to college and starting to work on my degree in anthropology, just in the footsteps of all our famous primatologists. And that finally led me to grad school, working on my thesis, and that took me to South Africa, a small sanctuary there where they rescued chimps from all over, mostly Africa, from horrible traumatic situations. Things like being chained up outside of a nightclub to a palm tree with just a tire there for you. This particular guy, Zach, when they brought him in, he was a third of the weight he was supposed to be. He was addicted to cigarettes, to alcohol, to drugs. He had malaria. He was in really bad shape. And other ones, another guy, Cozy, who's down there in the bottom left, was kept in the back of a station wagon his whole life and was beaten over the head to teach him how to take pictures with tourists. So these chimps were rescued from traumatic situations. So, really in a sense, the work is kind of similar. I just jumped species. Because that's why I loved this place. It was to go help these chimps who've been through such a horrible situation, and the chance is to help them basically rehabilitate as normal, thriving chimps with a chimp family, so they could, be out there and hopefully released back into the wild one day. But these are the cute and cuddly guys, you normally see on TV, or commercials or entertainment circuses and all that. But usually only see chimps like that when they're young, especially when the males, especially like this guy here. This is Nicky. When they get about 8-9 years old, they really start to bulk up. And an adult male chimp can get anywhere, maybe about 4.5 feet tall, but they can be up to about 200 pounds of just pure, power and rage and muscle. They can also be really sweet and beautiful and intelligent and caring, which is why I've loved them my whole life. But they are very well known to have these moments where they can be incredibly aggressive and rage out and just flip on an instant. And you can see just that strength combined with teeth and jaws like that. It's a dangerous combination. And June 28th, 2012, this was my reality here.
This is Tough Stuff, Dad. He was attacked by the animals he loved so much. This morning, Andrew Oberle remains in intensive care, fighting for his life.
So as you can imagine, a story like this, American kid in Africa, almost killed by chimps, fighting for his life, gets a lot of news coverage. We had people from stations from all over the world coming and trying to get pictures and parked outside of the hospitals. And when they transported me, they had to cover me up with a towel, and they snuck my mom out of the back of the hospital just because we were being hounded. When we got back to the States, my mom even needed to stay at a friend's house for about 5 weeks because we had a news van parked outside of the house 24/7, just waiting for her to come home to get an interview, a word, a picture, anything. So it was bad for a sense, but also I wouldn't be here today if my story wouldn't have been like this, because a lot of the things that started kind of being dropped in my path that helped me along the way are really because of the viral nature of what happened to me. So in a sense, I'm grateful that everybody knows about this, because it's led to a lot of really amazing things. But these were the two guys, Nicky and Amadeus, and I put them up there because it's different than a lot of trauma where you get hit by a car or you fall down or anything like that. I knew these guys. I was there to help them, and me being there up there that day at their enclosure. I was leading a small tour. I was standing tall. I had a big bowl of food, talking loud. I didn't go up to their enclosure too much. My work was with the little guys. But me being there and kind of in the chimp language, being tall and loud is, a big, tall, loud male is a sign of, hey, I'm coming in here to show off how tough I am. Ooh, I see your girls over there. So, we can never know what's going on in an animal's mind, but, educated guess would be that, here's a new male invading my territory. We got to, show him who's boss. So that's when everything turned red for me. And it was Nikki and Amadeus, and I'm there. You know, another difference in a lot of, especially animal attacks. I meet quite a few in the hospital now. It's mostly dogs, but you remember them because I think it's because you have to be in a place in your mind where you're trying to fight for your life and survive. It's different than, being in a sudden impact or something like that where it changes an instant. But here I'm fighting for my life. I'm screaming, to them by name, Nikki, Amadeus, please stop. And they're just, they're beating and biting. And, I can remember it all, even 10 years later, I can close my eyes and, feel the hot breath on my face or feel the crunching, on the back of my skull where they took a nice little chunk there. I remember watching them, as I'm trying to just curl up in a defensive position. They have me pinned down and peeling my fingers back, one by one. This little piggy went to the market style. This little piggy went home, and just nothing I could do about it. I'm screaming for help. And it was finally at one point they left me alone. And I remember laying flat and kind of coming to. And this is just to kind of show the level of awareness I still kind of had going on through all this. I was maybe from here to, where the collab sign is down there at the end of the hall. From another enclosure with where Cozy lived, the chimp I told you about that I showed you the picture where I was laying there next to him. I felt I had a nice relationship with Cozy. We spent a lot of time together making faces at each other and, goofing around, and loved him. And I was like, oh, Cozy's right there. I think if I can just get to close to Cozy's enclosure, maybe he'll do something to protect me or distract me. So even in that moment where these two handsome guys are just tearing me to pieces and I'm fighting for my life, still in my mind, I'm thinking about maybe this other chimp can help me. So, a question I get a lot is, do I like chimps anymore? And the question is yes. Even these two guys, I don't have hard feelings. They're just being who they are. But I was alone with them for 20 to 30 minutes fighting, and finally I was rescued from the scene. The last thing I remember is the sensation of being kind of lifted up, slid, which is me being put in the back of an ambulance, and being asked if I knew where I was. I said the name of the sanctuary, and then everything went black. And then 2.5 weeks later, over the next couple weeks, these stories were coming out all over. I'm there fighting for my life. I'm in critical condition, but here the doctors have saved my life and shipped me to one of the only level 1 trauma centers in the entire country. And this was me. Everything was dark. I was put into a medically induced coma, and I stayed there for 2.5 weeks as they were fighting off the infections, having to amputate more. They tore off a lot of my scalp. Bit off my nose, my ears, nice bites out of my face. As you can see, my fingers, destroyed my wrists, elbows. I got a really gnarly, clear as day, claw mark right here across my abdomen, chunks out of my back and my legs. I'm missing like half of both of my feet. My right, it's pretty bad. I also had a collapsed lung. I was going through acute respiratory distress syndrome. I went into septic shock several times. I should not be here today. And, especially, in a country like South Africa, where, their medical care is definitely not up to par with the United States, but, they kept me alive. And so I will never knock their healthcare system, because I was also an American kid too. So they took me in, they kept me alive, they got me stronger, and but it was a hard time. It was, as you can imagine, I was scared, I was angry, I was lost. My life had been shattered. I had been ripped away from everything I loved, the animals I loved, my whole life put me here. I was a marathon runner before I got hurt, and here I am looking at, my feet missing, bandaged, bloodied body, just down there, and it was tough. I cried a lot. I wasn't, the nicest person to my providers at times, to my family at times. But when you're going through something so traumatic, you take it out on the people who are closest to you. But I started seeing a little bit of hope, and that's where this journey of surviving and thriving really starts. I started seeing this light at the end of the tunnel, or maybe not at the end of the tunnel, but this light in front of me, because it got so wide and encompassing. So it definitely wasn't this narrow focus, but it was just from every angle. My friends were sending me pictures of my dog. They were taking care of her back home. This is Angie, and this hung up on the wall at the end of my bed in my hospital room so I could look at that every day. We were getting notes and cards from all over the world. My mom would sit by my bedside and read them to me, and she would hang those around the pictures of Angie. So literally every day I could lay there and look past this mess, this hopelessness, and see hope and love and encouragement in front of me. So it was really a powerful thing. That's something I always recommend to people when they're in the hospital. You know, if you have pictures of that your loved one loves, hang them up there for them to see, because it's going to mean a lot to them. My friends back home here in St. Louis, as well, and in San Antonio, where I was going to school at the time, were throwing benefits for me, try to raise money. I was 26 years old, not covered. I was a young invincible, like probably some of us in this room. We don't need insurance. We're young. We're not going to get sick or injured, so I can let that lapse. And when I get a real job, I'll buy that insurance. But that was a mistake, because I was an uninsured kid when all this happened to me. So luckily, I had a traveler's insurance that got me into my hospital in South Africa. But when SLU finally accepted me, I was uninsured. Probably needing $1 million worth of reconstructive surgery. No real prospect of success because of what I had been through. But there were some people that took a chance on me. But my friends were raising that money because they knew I would need that help. So they, through benefit concerts and things like mouse races and trivia nights. And is mouse races only like a St. Louis thing? Because I've never heard of it outside of St. Louis. Whenever I tell this story outside of St. Louis, people look at me like I'm crazy. But they would do things like that. And like my grade school opened up their gym for that. My old high school theater group, threw a big fundraiser for me. So people were coming from all over. Plus strangers were buying these little $5 bracelets. I still wear 10 years, later, just $5 a piece to just do everything they could to help me out. But it was these people at SLU. If you have been at St. Louis University for a while, you might recognize Dr. Bruce Kramer down there at the right. He was our chief of plastic surgery. Helen's there at the left. She was our director of emergency medicine. And she was a friend of the family. She went to the hospital's president, said, if we don't get him here, he's not going to survive. And she fought and fought until he said yes, as long as you can find a doctor to take his case. That's when she found this brilliant guy here, and that secured my victory home. And that's where I landed, right there on the emergency bay at the old SLU hospital. Would have been nice to have this happen just a couple years ago, to be in the new SLU hospital, because those rooms are amazing. But it was everything I needed, because it set me on this path to where I am today. I don't have a lot of pictures from my time in the hospital. I wish I did. As you can imagine, people wanted those pictures. They wanted the gory pictures. They wanted to see the injuries. So that was a decision my mom made. Nobody's taking a picture in here. That picture I showed you of me on my deathbed, my dad took that in South Africa when she went out to go to the bathroom. And he told me he did it and showed it to me over 6 years later after this happened, and said, don't tell your mom I took this. But so I wish I had more pictures. That one is the only early one. And then after 4 weeks, 2 months in the ICU in South Africa, 4 weeks at SLU Hospital, and then 6 more weeks. This is a picture taken at the Rehab Institute of St. Louis, which is just right over here, where I went from not getting out of my bed for over 3 months to standing at a parallel bars for the very first time again. I remember that feeling. My legs are shaking. I had just had skin grafts taken from my thighs to patch up my other wounds, and all these blood vessels were popping, so my bandages were getting red, but I'm sitting there standing and my legs are shaking, and I smiled as big as I could, because it was a good. I hadn't stood up in probably 4.5 months. And you know, you take little things like that for granted, you know, just being able to stand up. And so that was quite a moment for me. And from there, I just kept that miracle moving. I got to go home. I got to be with Angie again. She was there with me, helped me through all my surgeries when I'd come home, and didn't want to take my pain medication because I hate how it makes me feel. Angie would be there to cry with me. She'd be there to eat my meals with me, just like before. And again, you know, after surgery, she's an amazing dog, and she comes up a little bit later in the story, but she recently passed, and you know, life's not the same without her. But she really helped me through a lot, and you know, she was there when I needed her most. You know, I was stuck in this back room at my mom's house. You know, I'm a 26-year-old, you know, guy. I spent so much of my life like trying to move out of my mom's house, and here I am, you know, being forced to be back there. But we made it work. I thank her so much for everything that she did, because she was my mama bear, and she kept me safe and provided everything I needed. So I'd sit there on this exercise bike when I was able to finally get up and just wheel away. Just because laying in a bed for 24 hours a day, it's fun at first, you know, but after having to do it for months and months, you just want to move. This was always hanging up in my room to keep me motivated and remind me that I left rehab. This was a gift from my rehab specialist at the rehab hospital. On my graduation day, they tied this to the back of my wheelchair, and then we hung it up in my room. So I always had that inspiration to, you know, hey, look what I've done. Let's keep going. And then I always had my cheerleader there. This is a picture I took. I was laying on the floor just doing some leg lifts, and she's just making sure I'm okay. Awesome girl. And you know, with all that support and everything was just going so right. It was on the 1-year anniversary plus 1 day where I got back into the racing world, and went to the Macklin Mile, and with my friends and my family, some new friends that I made because of what happened. We walked that mile. It took me about 45 minutes, but you know, I did it, and it was an amazing feeling. I never thought I'd cross a finish line again, and here I was. I still had my trach in my neck. I had just gotten my new prosthetic for the very first time, but we did it, and so I just kept that going, and I kept, you know, keeping that feeling going, and keeping, you know, the support that my family and my friends were giving me. They believed in me, and they encouraged me, and like, how can you feel down, and how can you feel not confident in yourself when you have hundreds of people around you telling you that you can do it, or even just 2 people around you telling you can do it. So I kept that going, and that led me, you know, all the way to the video that you saw. Me throwing out my pitch at Busch Stadium, August 13th, 2015, against the Pirates. We lost that game, but my pitch was right down the middle. It's a little high, but Fredbird called it a strike, and he's the official authority, so we'll defer to him. But you know, during all this awesome stuff happening, I still had that why me question. You know, when something bad happens to us, we all ask ourselves, you know, why me? Why did I do to deserve this? Why is this happening to me? That's a question we all have. When you survive trauma and you're laying in a hospital bed, it's something that just is put on repeat in your head 24 hours a day sometimes. And the only break from thinking, why me, is, you know, doctors coming in to change your dressings, or, you know, suction your trach out, or, you know, take you to surgery. So it's not pleasant. Being hospitalized is pretty traumatic in and of itself. But I had this why me question, and I was making all these great accomplishments personally, but it didn't answer that question. Yeah, here I am, you know, I'm doing great, I survived, but what's the real purpose in all the suffering I went through and all the things that happened up to that point? And I started getting, I started getting out there a little bit more and putting myself out there. So I started doing, you know, some, first I went and finished that degree that almost took my life. So I graduated Mother's Day 2015 that weekend, and started training a little bit more, and I started doing some, I got back out running with Angie, started telling my story more, and that's where things really started to pick up for me. This was an interview I did at KMOX, but so I was just getting out there. I felt more confident. All these great things were happening in my life, and I think that really gave me the confidence to get back out into the world and start to share that story. And that's what really kicked off the Oberle Institute, was sharing that story, which is why I'm such a huge advocate of people sharing their stories, because great things can happen from that. There's 3 people that were super important in that, and I put these fun pictures because these visionaries are all important parts of my life, more than just work colleagues or donors. These people have become family. So you have Mike Higgins over there on the left. If you guys have been around BioSTL at all, you might know Mike. He's the VP for development over there. He met Dr. Kramer. He worked with him, at SLU. And after I shared my story, Mike went to Dr. Kramer and was like, "Hey, I just saw Andrew's story on the news. Like, tell me more. Why? How did he have such a successful recovery? What we need to bottle that and give it to all of our trauma patients, because if Andrew had this kind of a recovery, why can't everybody else? SLU sees such horrible trauma, and some of the patients have such horrible outcomes. What was different about my care and my recovery journey that led to my success?" So he and Dr. Kramer, so that's Mike at my wedding with his wife. That's me and Dr. Kramer having a Wizards duel down at Harry Potter's land in Orlando Studios. They got together, invited me to share some ideas, what worked for me, what didn't, what do I wish I would have had while I was going through my recovery, and most importantly, will you come use your experience and help us take better care of our trauma patients? Of course, I said yes, and that's when we went down to this awesome guy up here in the top. As you can see, a big Texas fan. His name's Mr. Red McCombs, and he's what a lot of all the people in the startup world long for is a very, very successful, wealthy businessman who has a huge heart and wants to do huge good in the world. And for some reason, as he says, he saw this San Antonio boy where he's from, all sorts of chewed up, and he wanted to help, and so he did, and he helped me out in a huge way on a personal level. But when Mike and Dr. Kramer had this idea and got me on board, we just needed one more person to help, start that seed, give it that little bit of support to help it start growing. And he did, and Mr. McCombs has been supporting my salary here at SLU for 6 years now, him and his family. And I'm grateful I get to hold the inaugural fellow of the inaugural Red and Charlene McCombs Fellow for the Improvement of Trauma Care here at SLU. So it's an honor, and I always get to have the family's name with me. But that's what we did. We had our vision, we had our mission, we had some people inside to help get me in the door and get me introduced to all the right people, and then we had our investor, and we were able to get started. But as I said, I planned on picking up chimp poop the rest of my life. I was just put into a healthcare leadership role with no healthcare leadership experience or training or anything like that whatsoever. So I just started sharing my story more. This is actually my med launch talk all those years ago. It's the picture I send for all my events when they ask for a headshot or a biopic. So I started sharing my story more. I started meeting the right people, learning how, meeting everybody at SLU and people out in the community who could do anything to support trauma survivors. And so I found them, going out into the community, meeting survivor groups, and sharing my story there just to provide a little hope. And it was Dr. Kramer, when he found out I was doing this and kind of sharing my story, meeting, some people out in the community who've gone through trauma. He invited me one day. He had a patient who had a very similar right foot amputation as me this is Ben. He said, hey, I have this patient, Ben, coming through. Ben got his foot caught in a steel slitter at work, and it took his foot off. And he had a rough time, but Dr. Kramer took good care of him, was able to save a lot of his foot, thankfully, but still had a pretty good amputation. But he said, hey, Ben's coming in. Would you like to meet him? And I think he'd benefit from meeting you. And that's kind of where it all started. That's at the time I was just meeting somebody Dr. Kramer asked me to meet, but looking back, it was the start of the foundation of what the Oberle Institute really is now, and it's this support system for people who are just trying to survive and trying to thrive. So I kept doing that more. I got that idea from this peer visiting that I'd started doing with Dr. Kramer's patients. How can I, as one of my professors, how do I operationalize that? I had no idea. I took chimp theory classes in college, so I had no plan. So I luckily go to a great school. I worked on my master's in health administration. I earned that. This is graduation day with my beautiful wife, Vanessa, and our oldest daughter, Lily, who's now 5.5 years old, with 2 little sisters behind her. But that taught me more how to get things going in healthcare, how to establish yourself, how to establish a program, how to get some outcomes going. And that's when I started a pilot program in the hospital where I would, work with the staff up there to find these trauma survivors who were struggling with their injuries and what happened to them, and I'd come up and visit them. I would also arrange music therapy if they wanted it, from our cancer center. Some friends came to help out. I made sure if they wanted a chaplain to come visit that we coordinated with the pastoral care department. And then finally, if they would like to have it, I made sure we had our dog therapy team go up there, because all these things were very important. In my recovery, I wanted to make sure at least we were providing that to our patients. The dogs, the music, the chaplain were all important for me, and so at least give them something, a little bit, because at that time, our trauma patients weren't getting any of that. They would get the chaplain sometimes. You may be in trauma care. You'll get a psych consult if you're expressing suicidal ideations. But, in the 10 years that I was, let's say in the 3 years I was in the hospital and going through a lot of my surgeries and all that, I didn't have one healthcare professional ask if I wanted to talk about what happened to me. Going through what I went through, how can trauma patients need, probably more than most patient populations out there, you're going through something traumatic. You gotta process, and you gotta talk, and you can't do it when it's just up in your head, because then you get into these ruminating thoughts like I had. This why me, why? So just giving them somebody to talk to as they're coming into this new life, waking up to a life that's been shattered, and they have to start rebuilding from scratch, and they don't know how. And having that somebody who's been there and gone through that journey is such a powerful tool to have. And just the success that we saw just with the small pilot program in the hospital. This is Genva. Marcy's here at the bottom right. Genva, both motorcycle accidents. Word of advice: just stay away from motorcycles. It's never the motorcyclist's fault, really. It's somebody hits them. But those are always just such horrible injuries. So just a little injury prevention tidbit for you, because I love seeing you all here. I don't want to have to see you in the hospital. But if you do end up being there, I'm here for you, and we'll help you get through it. But this is Genva. This is when she got to try on her prosthetic for the first time after losing her leg, and I got to be there for some pretty amazing moments. And the hospital saw this and approached me and said, "Hey, would you be willing to do this on a regular basis for our patients, and actually be a referral for us?" So I do that now up in the trauma unit at the hospital, but it started growing from there and more. And we had a long technical name. It was called the Center for Innovative Reconstruction and Rehabilitation, and I bet probably half of you couldn't even repeat that to me back, which is why we changed it. One of our very generous supporters, Walter Knoll, flower guy in town, we had a meeting with him to pick his marketing brain, and after saying Center for Innovative Reconstruction and Rehabilitation about 5 times, he told me to stop, said, before we do anything else, we need to change that horrible name to something that actually is going to inspire people and tell a story. And when that wife is sitting in the back of an ambulance with her husband who just fell off the roof, you know, she's not going to say, take me to the Center for Innovative Reconstruction and Rehabilitation. She's not going to remember that, but she might remember, oh, I saw that Oberle guy on the news and what he did and how he's gone, you know, how he's been after going what he went through. Let's go there. So we changed the name to the Oberle Institute. We actually had a really, you know, I didn't have a lot of resources. I had Mr. McComb's support was kind of getting me through, you know, just getting me my place in SLU, but I didn't know how to do branding or develop, you know, a business case or anything like that. The MHA really helped with that a lot. But so one day I got with the marketing college at SLU, at the School of Business, one of the marketing professors, and we did a student competition where groups of students in one of their marketing classes created a brand for the Oberle Institute. You know, I came and presented my story, and then they worked and put together business cases for me. And it was awesome, and it was really great to see all their young, you know, just really excited minds getting going this and helping me really establish, you know, a lot of the talking points and the brand and the language that I use. But one thing that I really loved was this logo that one of them made up. We don't use that now. This is an unofficial old Oberle Institute logo. I am part of St. Louis University, so I do have to use, you know, their logos, which we have now. But I love that. It was cool. And, you know, one of these days, if, you know, say I ever, like, you know, win a big idea competition or something, you know, maybe I can go back to an old logo. But we'll see what happens there. We got a lot of work still to do, but to get to that point. But I have an official SLU logo. How cool is that? I mean, this is a over 200-year-old institution, you know, elite, you know, private university, and, you know, my family's name's up there. It's not just my family's name. My name is, you know, ingrained at SLU. So I mean, it's pretty awesome. It's a cool feeling to have. And what the Oberle Institute has grown into now, from that, you know, that horrible story to that inkling of an idea to a little bit of support to meeting the right people, coming up with the name, and getting my bearings in the healthcare industry, and meeting patients. We have the Oberle Institute, and what that is now is a series of free services that we offer to our patients, our trauma patients at SLU, to our trauma families at SLU, because, you know, if anybody needed help after all this happened to me, it was my mom. You know, don't tell her I told you, but she probably went, you know, put a few years, you know, in the gray hairs for her. But the family needs support. Trauma affects us all. I mean, I had no choice. I was laying in that bed, you know, fighting. My mom was the one watching me suffer. She was the one worrying that she might not have her son in her life anymore. She was the one having to deal with the social workers and the insurance companies and you know, all the government, you know, payers and all this horrible stuff. And then she was also the one then having to share all that information with my family, all the people calling her and texting her, you know, then, you know, having to be escorted out of the hospital secretly and not be able to go home. So we want to make sure we're supporting our families too. And so we have other programs to support, but I'm going to walk you through those a little bit. So here's our beautiful new hospital, over $500 million. The SSM invested in this new, amazing hospital. My favorite part being the Emergency and Trauma Center. And what we have is we've established what's called a Trauma Survivors Network. And that's the Trauma Survivors Network is a program of the American Trauma Society. What they are, it's the nation's kind of leading national advocate for the trauma system. So they advocate for trauma survivors, families, providers, and just the whole trauma care system in general. And what they do is, if we kind of join underneath their umbrella as a Trauma Survivors Network hospital, we get access to a lot of great resources for our patients. They help us kind of adapt our programs to fit our hospital. So this is one thing. This is kind of an adaptation of a brochure that we hand out now, but it tells our stories, our contact information. Patients and families can scan these QR codes. They can join our network, select our hospital, and that way they get all of our communications that go out. So when we have events coming up, programs coming up, or other just news and events, they can get those automatically through their email, and they can even connect with other survivors kind of on like a social media kind of network. We offer one-on-one peer visiting. I still do that. I still go up to rooms. I was just up in one yesterday talking to a family of somebody who's really fighting for their life after a bad motorcycle accident. So sometimes I talk to families because the patient isn't even able to talk yet. We created a patient and family handbook. One thing that is so common in trauma, I mean, families are confused. The informal caregiver, whether it's a loved one, a family member, they're confused. They're getting so much information and jargon thrown at them. They have all these questions, and then a doctor comes in for 5 minutes to do a round, and then do you have any questions? And you're blank because you're just trying to process everything that they said. So we have this handbook that talks about the hospital, where they can find things within the hospital, pages to take notes, a whole glossary of all these medical terms, procedures, injuries, who these different professionals are, a lot of information about discharge, different rehab hospitals, community resources, how to keep in touch with our Trauma Survivors Network. So we give this to not all of our patients yet. They're expensive. It's like $7 a copy to print because it's a pretty thick book. It has a lot of great information, but we have a digital copy that when they get this brochure, they can scan that, and then the handbook will pop up on their phone. The goal is eventually to have enough funding to where we can just give the book to everybody. But as you all know, that's we're still kind of new. We do the one-on-one peer visiting. I do it, but we're now sending out invites to former patients that I've worked with. So we're building that peer visiting network. We have 2 people are going to be in our very first class. One's a motorcycle survivor who's going to be a great help to a lot of people. And then my mom is going to be our family support visitor. So she'll come up and have a coffee with a family member and just let them know that there's maybe some hope out there, just to help them get a little bit of a break. We also do a monthly virtual support group. It's a way for patients, once they leave the hospital, to come back. Let me check my time here. I don't want to. Okay, I'm almost finished up. The support group in SLU covers 250-mile radius around the St. Louis region. So we made it virtual so people can come. It's hard to get back to the hospital even if you live 20 minutes away and had an injury, but when you're 2 hours away, it's almost impossible. So we opened it up virtually so survivors we can come connect, we can talk to each other, and just be there to each other as we go through this journey together. We do family support rounds where we take this cart with some refreshments, with our handbooks, and more information about our Trauma Survivors Network, and we meet with the families, and we provide them a little bit. Trauma families are notorious for not taking care of themselves when their loved one's in the hospital. They don't eat well, they don't shower, they don't sleep, and it's totally understandable, but so we're there to remind them that it's okay to take a quick break, eat something, drink something. Here's some information that might be useful to you and your loved one when you all are ready for it. This month's support group, one reason I love that it's virtual is I actually have to travel to Washington, D.C. I'm on the board of directors for the American Trauma Society, and I have my very first meeting, but I will be able to do our virtual support group from there. Each week we do a topic. Of course, for the Christmas season, we're going to talk about the gift. Is that the gift that sometimes trauma can bring? Is that the gift of all these gifts that we receive along the way that I've shared with you? And then we have a special guest, which is going to be a gift for the people who attend the meeting. We can't take care of our patients if our providers aren't supported. And I wrote a grant, and we got a nice fund to start a support program for our emergency medicine and trauma surgery providers. So when they experience something potentially traumatic in the line of duty, we have a protocol that'll get triggered where it'll set up some debriefing meetings. It'll open up a 24-hour confidential hotline and an external referral service if the providers don't want to seek. So the goal is to be there for them. I mean, these folks see horrible things day in and day out, and they need that help. And there's so much research that shows when these folks are doing bad, patient care suffers. Also, I'm on the associate board for Impact Life Blood Center. So I go around and try to get more blood. I needed 20 units of blood in my first emergency surgery to keep me alive. I'll work my whole life to repay that, but so I go around the community and try to rope more people into hosting drives. Maybe Collab might want to do a blood drive. We'll talk later about that, and maybe. So that's my goal. I mean, again, supporting survivors on that journey. I love our mission because it's so broad. It doesn't even have to include traumatic injuries, and that's the hope, because I'm doing more work now. We have our research lab at SLU. I'm training and kind of mentoring about 12 medical and nursing students right now, and they're helping out with some of my research. I do trauma care consulting, so I've done some virtual days in DC. I've been invited by different hospitals, both in town and out of town, to help them start their own Trauma Survivors Network programs or support programs. Something that's really new to the Oberle Institute, it just happened 2 days ago, is I'm calling it our Speakers Bureau. This is all brand new. I do a lot of talking. I've given dozens and dozens of talks, but I just coached my very first trauma survivor who was just invited to share their story for the first time. And what that meant to her, I mean, she's just been telling me how amazing it was for her and how much it meant to her. And it's everything she's been waiting for this whole 3 years, 3 years for her too. So that's my hope, is to get her out there speaking more and get these engagements so she can get out there and share her story. It's good for her, it's good for other people, and hopefully it'll help them make some money too, because some organizations will actually pay a lot of money to hear these stories. So that's my goal in starting the Speakers Bureau, is to get more inspiring stories and help these people share their stories. And getting back into the workforce after a traumatic injury is difficult, and sometimes it's impossible. So having something like this to where they can potentially, make a little money to help support them and their families is something I would love to help them do. And then finally, all this outreach. I sit on boards and committees and always make sure I'm that voice for the trauma survivor in any planning that we do, both at the Institute for Translational Neuroscience that just started at SLU, American Trauma Society, Blood Center. But really just, that's the story of my journey from surviving to thriving, and how, with the support of just amazing people along the way, I've kept that miracle moving, and now I get to help other people, on their journeys. And it answers that why me question. I'm so grateful for that, and grateful for y'all sticking with me here. And I'd love to answer any questions. Sorry if I went a little bit over, but I love this. I love sharing my story because it's my story. It's so personal. So thank you for being here. Yeah, please. Yeah, if you guys. Yeah. Oh, no, yeah, I'll be out there, so I'll get out of here. I don't want to.
Truly inspiring.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that just incredible message with us this morning.
Of course, yeah, and first name dot last name at slu.edu or health.slu.edu. So if you need me, but you can scan that on the way out. That'll take you to our webpage at SLU. But since there is a panel coming in, I'll go out there, and if you guys have any questions, I'd be happy to sit out there and chat some more.